The twin suns hung low over the rust-stained horizon, bleeding gold and crimson light across the jagged bones of the desert. It wasn't the kind of place tourists visited, not unless they wanted radiation burns and sand scorpions gnawing on their boots. But for Kaylin, this wasteland was home, in the loosest, most miserable definition of the word. She crouched behind a rusted-out hull of what used to be a transport ship, its skeletal frame jutting from the sand like the ribs of some long-dead metal beast. Her long ears twitched beneath the scarf wrapped around her head, catching faint vibrations in the air. Guards, drones, the hum of an overloaded fusion core somewhere far off. The Iliari city wasn't close, but it was never far enough, not when you carried the wrong blood. "Scrap heap's quiet today," she muttered, kicking a piece of corroded plating aside with her boot. The metal clanged like a bell, announcing her position to the stars. Fantastic. Kaylin scanned the dunes, eyes sharp, pale markings along her jaw, almost glowing under the sun's glare. No patrols, no scavengers, just sand, relics, and the whisper of another pointless day scraping by in a society that spat her out like defective tech. Then the sky split, a burning streak carved across the atmosphere, white-hot against the blue expanse, trailing smoke and fire. Something or someone was coming down hard. Kaylin's pulse kicked up. Shuttle crash by the look of it. Probably some drunk cargo runner skimming too low. But if luck existed, which it didn't, it might mean salvage. She didn't hesitate. Her boots crunched over shattered glass and twisted wiring as she sprinted toward the smoke plume, curling in the distance. By the time she crested the last dune, the wreckage came into view. A small, battered shuttle half buried in the sand, hull scorched, emergency lights flickering weakly. And sprawled beside it, face first in the grit, was a human. A real, flesh-and-blood human. She hadn't seen one this close before. Kaylin tilted her head, ears flicking as she approached cautiously. Humans were rare here, too expensive to waste on outposts like Leora. They were usually military or mercenaries. This one looked more like he belonged in a bar fight than a battlefield. His uniform was singed, armor plates cracked, and he was muttering something incoherent into the sand. She nudged him with the toe of her boot. "Hey, ground kisser, you alive?" The man groaned, rolling onto his back with all the grace of a malfunctioning loader droid. His face was smeared with soot and blood, dark hair sticking to his forehead, but the smirk curling his lips was annoyingly intact. "Well," he rasped, voice rough but oddly cheerful, "if you're an angel, I've clearly died. If you're not, congratulations. You're the most gorgeous hallucination I've had all week." Kaylin blinked. Gorgeous? No one called her that, not unless they were about to insult her genetics right after. Her fingers curled reflexively, ready to deck him, but the guy coughed violently, clutching his ribs, and any retort died in her throat. "You're bleeding," she said, more observation than concern. "Yeah, I noticed," he wheezed, attempting and failing to sit up. "Pretty sure I broke everything. Got a med kit stashed in the shuttle. If you're planning to loot me, maybe patch me up first?" "Fair trade," Kaylin snorted. "You assume I'm interested in looting." "Come on," he groaned, giving her a lopsided grin despite the pain. "Sun's blasted desert, crashed ship, unconscious pilot. You're either a scavenger or the world's most conveniently timed rescue." Her lips twitched despite herself. Cocky, half dead, probably concussed, but still cracking jokes. Typical human. Against better judgment, she crouched beside him, assessing the damage. His side was bleeding, likely fractured ribs, maybe worse. Her people wouldn't help him. Not an outsider, not a human. And leaving him here meant slow death under the unforgiving suns. She sighed heavily. "Stay still. If you die before I get my salvage, I'll be irritated." "That's the spirit," he rasped, eyes fluttering shut as she moved to the shuttle wreckage. Inside, the cabin was a mess of sparking panels and emergency supplies scattered across the deck. She grabbed the med kit, muttering under her breath about idiot off-worlders with no sense of altitude control, and returned to him. He flinched as she worked, but managed a weak chuckle when she pressed a sealant patch to his wound. "You have really nice hands for someone threatening to rob me." Kaylin rolled her eyes. "I'm regretting saving you already. Name's Dax Calder, he offered, wincing as she tightened a compression wrap around his ribs. Captain, technically. Not that the rank means much while face down in sand. Kalen, she replied curtly, finishing the patch job with practiced efficiency. Kalen, he echoed, testing the name with a grin that bordered on infuriating. Beautiful name for a beautiful... Don't finish that sentence, she warned, raising a brow. Dax held up his hands in surrender, smirk never wavering. Noted. Appreciative silence commencing. She shook her head, standing and glancing toward the hazy horizon. The Eliari patrols wouldn't ignore a crash site forever. They'd come sniffing around, and when they found him, well, half-breed outcast or not, she didn't fancy explaining why she was harboring a human. Can you walk? She asked. Define walk. Dax grunted, struggling to his feet, swaying like a malfunctioning hoverbike. I can stagger heroically. Counts? Close enough. She looped his arm over her shoulders, supporting more of his weight than she liked to admit. They limped away from the wreck, leaving a trail of uneven footprints in the sand. Overhead, the suns burned bright, indifferent to the ridiculousness of it all. You sure I'm not hallucinating? He asked, glancing sidelong at her, eyes lingering on her long ears, the faint glow of her markings. Kalen snorted. If I was a hallucination, I wouldn't smell like engine grease and poor life choices. Dax laughed, pained, breathless, but genuine. And for the first time in a long while, Kalen didn't feel entirely alone out here. Not that she planned on telling him that. The canyon walls rose like rusted blades around them, sharp and unforgiving, their jagged shadows stretching long beneath the twin moons of Leora. Kalen led the way, her boots slipping occasionally on loose gravel. Dax half-draped over her shoulders, limping like a man with more pride than sense, which in his case was accurate. You know, he muttered between ragged breaths, this isn't exactly how I pictured my heroic planetary landing. You crashed like a flaming trash hauler, Kalen shot back, adjusting his weight. I've seen asteroids enter atmosphere with more grace. Harsh. True, but harsh. His lips quirked with that insufferable grin again, even as he winced with every step. You always this charming? Or is it just for concussed strangers? I'm saving my best charm for when you stop bleeding all over my desert. Their banter echoed off the canyon walls, the only sound beyond the distant hum of Eliari patrol drones sweeping the horizon. The thought tightened Kalen's chest. She shouldn't be here, hauling around some reckless human like a malfunctioning piece of cargo. But his words, beautiful, still clung to her like static, unwelcome and disarming. They reached a narrow crevice between two slabs of sun-bleached rock, hidden from the open dunes. Kalen ducked inside, guiding Dax toward the small shelter carved into the canyon's edge. It wasn't much, just some scavenged scrap, faded tarps, a half-working energy lamp flickering in the corner. But it was hidden, quiet. Heron Dax sagged onto a makeshift bench with a groan, pressing a hand to his ribs. Cozy, I love what you've done with the place. The decor screams, please patrols, don't vaporize me. Kalen tossed him a cracked water flask. Drink. You're dehydrated. And if they find you, they'll vaporize both of us. He took a sip, grimaced at the metallic aftertaste, but didn't complain. His eyes roamed the shelter, lingering on the patched-up equipment, the worn survival gear, the old Eliari insignias scratched out on discarded armor pieces. Outcast? He asked softly, less teasing now. Kalen's jaw tensed. She busied herself checking the perimeter sensors, old cobbled-together devices, buzzing faintly with power. Not your concern. Kalen, you saved me, patched me up, dragged my sorry, smoking carcass through the desert. Pretty sure that makes your concerns my concerns. She snorted, but her fingers hesitated over the sensor pad. No one ever asked. Not like that. Not with humor hiding the edges of curiosity instead of disdain. I don't fit, she said finally, voice low, flat. Long ears, pale markings, half-breed, mistake. My people don't exactly hand out parade invitations for that. Dax leaned back, wincing as his ribs protested. Let me get this straight. They mock you because you look like this? His hand gestured vaguely toward her, encompassing the sharp lines of her face, the silver-blue glow tracing faint patterns across her skin. His gaze lingered, eyes bright with something unreadable. Admiration or amusement, maybe both. They need their eyes recalibrated. Kalen arched a brow. You're delirious. Possible, Dax agreed easily, grinning. But I've been around enough planets to know beauty when it kicks me in the gut. Her cheeks flushed, the markings along her jaw warming faintly, much to her horror. She turned away, fiddling with the busted comm relay, fingers moving faster than her thoughts. So, she deflected, how does a heroic human captain crash on Leora without backup or a plan? Dax's smile faded, replaced by a shadow of something heavier. Long story, short version? Patrol ship ambushed, comms jammed, engines fried. Had to bail before the whole thing lit up like a fireworks show. Lucky me. Lucky us, he corrected with that maddening optimism. You got a good hiding spot, a half-functional medkit, and me. Professional interstellar disaster magnet. Kalen shook her head, unable to suppress the faintest smile. He was ridiculous, stubborn, far too quick with compliments that scraped at old scars. But there was a steadiness beneath the jokes. Something real. Night deepened outside, the canyon cooling under the moon's glow. Kalen adjusted the old heater core, static crackling as it sputtered to life, filling the shelter with faint warmth. Dax's eyes softened, his usual bravado easing into quiet observation. Why do you stay here? He asked, voice low, curious. Leora's a backwater rock. You could vanish into 100 systems, start fresh. Not that easy, she murmured, settling beside the heater. No one forgets your face when it's marked like mine. Out there, I'm still an anomaly. Easier to be invisible here. Dax tilted his head, studying her. Invisible? His gaze swept over her, lingering on the faint bioluminescence of her markings, the sharp curve of her ears. You stand out more than anyone I've met. Kalen scowled, tossing him a threadbare blanket. Flattery won't get you another med patch. Wasn't flattery, Dax replied, pulling the blanket around his shoulders with a grin. Just stating facts, and you still haven't answered my question from earlier. She frowned. What question? Dax's eyes glittered with amusement. Why do you think I'm beautiful, human soldier? He mimicked, his voice a teasing echo of hers from before. Kalen groaned, dragging a hand down her face. I wasn't fishing for compliments. Could have fooled me, he teased, winking despite the bruises mottling his jaw. She grabbed a nearby datapad, smacking him lightly on the shoulder. Sleep. You're insufferable when conscious. Dax chuckled, wincing as pain laced the sound, but the grin remained. If I die in my sleep, I want it on record. Beautiful desert warrior saved me and hit me with outdated tech. Kalen shook her head, settling beside the heater, ears twitching faintly as she listened to the wind outside. Despite the ridiculousness of it all, the crash, the human, the impossible conversations, a strange warmth settled in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, this disaster wasn't entirely unwelcome. By the third morning, the desert stopped pretending to be merciful. The suns came up brutal and blinding, burning off the cool shadows in Kalen's canyon refuge as if they'd never existed. The makeshift shelter groaned as the heat expanded old metal joints, and somewhere outside, a sand beetle clicked irritably at existence. Kalen stirred from her spot by the broken heater, scanning the space with groggy precision. Dax was still breathing, which, considering his talent for getting injured, was practically a miracle. His arm hung over his eyes, trying to block the harsh daylight filtering through a rip in the tarp. His other hand dangled off the side of the cot, clutching the remains of an energy bar wrapper like it might offer spiritual protection. You planning to sleep through planetary rotation? Kalen muttered, rising to her feet and stretching, the faint glow of her markings pulsing as she moved. Dax cracked an eye open, squinting at her with mock suffering. I crashed, got patched up by a beautiful stranger, and nearly coughed up a lung. I think I've earned a few hours of feeling sorry for myself. You've been milking that lung injury for 3 days. Tragic injuries don't heal overnight, he groaned, but his lips curled into a grin, especially when the nurse threatens bodily harm. Kalen rolled her eyes, tossing him a small canteen of water. Drink. We're moving. Moving? He pushed himself up with a wince, hair sticking up in every direction, like he'd fought the pillow and lost. You mean more than 10 steps to the makeshift bathroom? We need supplies, she said, checking the charge on her plasma pistol. You want your distress beacon working? That means parts. That means scavenging. Dax grimaced. Your people aren't exactly handing out spare tech to friendly humans. Kaylin's ears twitched as she secured her gear. We're not asking. An hour later, they stood on the outskirts of the Iliari junk fields, a sprawling expanse of broken starships, twisted alloy skeletons, and discarded tech shimmering under the relentless suns. Heat warped the air, and distant salvage drones buzzed between the wrecks like metallic hornets. This is your plan? Dax asked, eyeing the field. March into a scrapyard guarded by angry robots and probably worse? Kaylin smirked. Unless you want to ride a broken beacon into orbit yourself. Fair, but for the record, this feels like a terrible date. She led them through the wreckage, stepping over fractured hull plates and scorched components, her ears flicking for the hum of patrols. The air smelled of ozone, grease, and old failures. Dax kept pace, favoring his side but managing to keep the jokes flowing. Is this where you bring all your injured stray humans? It's romantic. First one, she replied dryly. Don't flatter yourself. They found the comm array tangled in the remains of a freighter, half buried under debris. Kaylin assessed the mess, frowning at the fried circuitry. It's salvageable, she muttered, kneeling beside the wreck. Dax crouched beside her, watching as she disconnected panels with nimble fingers. His eyes lingered on the faint glow of her markings, the sharp angles of her face. You're good at this, he remarked, more genuine than teasing. Kaylin shrugged. Comes with being invisible. No one stops you when they think you're nothing. Dax's expression darkened briefly, but his smirk returned fast enough to hide the edge. Their loss. Before she could respond, a sharp whine split the air, a security drone swooping overhead, sensors flaring crimson. Company, Dax muttered, hand drifting to his sidearm. Kaylin yanked free the comm unit, tucking it under her arm. We run. They bolted through the wreckage, metal groaning beneath their boots as the drone shrieked in alert. Plasma bolts sizzled past, scorching the ground inches from Dax's heel. Definitely the worst date I've ever had, he shouted, ducking behind a collapsed wing. You talk too much, Kaylin snapped, returning fire with precise bursts, her pistol humming with heat. They weaved through the maze of scrap, narrowly avoiding patrols as the drone buzzed overhead. Kaylin's mind raced. Paths, cover, weak points. Her people may have rejected her, but she'd memorized every flaw in their defenses. Sliding behind a fallen engine core, she yanked Dax down beside her, both of them panting, adrenaline crackling between them. Dax grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. See? Told you I'm good luck. You attract lasers, not luck, Kaylin shot back, checking the comm unit. But this might work. They limped back to the canyon by nightfall, the junkyard's alarm still echoing faintly in the distance. Inside the shelter, Kaylin dismantled the unit, fingers deft as she rewired circuits and bypassed security locks. Dax watched, leaning against the wall, admiration softening his features. You ever think maybe you're not a mistake? Maybe you're exactly what your people need? Kaylin's jaw tightened, her gaze never leaving the wires. They don't see it that way. Then they're idiots, he said simply, his voice steady. She paused, glancing at him. His expression held no teasing, just quiet certainty. Before she could reply, the comm unit beeped, active, pulsing with a faint signal. Dax's face lit up with relief. Beautiful and brilliant. You really know how to impress a guy. Kaylin snorted, tossing him a spare cable. Fix your end of the relay. You're not useless yet. As they worked side by side under the dim glow of the heater, something unspoken settled between them. Not just partnership, but the beginnings of something neither of them dared name. Outside, the desert wind whispered secrets across the dunes, and for the first time in years, Kaylin let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, being different wasn't the curse she'd always thought. The relay pulsed faint green, sending a thin signal slicing through the atmosphere. It wasn't much, just a whisper, but in space, whispers carried farther than most wars. Dax slumped beside the battered console, his hands smudged with grease, watching the tiny transmitter blink like it was the most beautiful thing in the galaxy. Kaylin inspected the jury-rigged cables with sharp eyes, testing each connection twice. Signal's weak, she muttered, tapping a gauge. If a transport's close, they'll hear. If not, we keep playing scavenger hide-and-seek with killer drones. Dax finished, giving her a crooked grin. Living the dream. She smirked despite herself, adjusting the interface. Your dreams need work. Most of them end with fewer plasma burns, I'll admit. His grin faded slightly as he shifted, wincing. You think they'll come? She hesitated. Hope wasn't exactly her specialty. Depends how much your people want you back. Dax chuckled, leaning his head back against the canyon wall. I'm sure the fleet misses me. Who else breaks ships, crashes on moons, and annoys locals within 24 hours? Kaylin shook her head, lips twitching. Tragic hero. Legendary disaster, more like. He tilted his gaze toward her, voice softening. But thanks for not leaving me. She shrugged, trying to downplay the warmth creeping under her skin. Don't read into it. You're useful. Barely. Beautiful and brutally honest, he teased, but there was no edge to it, just quiet gratitude wrapped in humor. Night settled over the canyon, stars bleeding across the sky, twin moons casting silver light on the rocky walls. Kaylin's ears flicked at a faint hum rising from her comm unit, and she tensed, scanning the display. Dax noticed her posture shift. What is it? Encrypted transmission, she said, fingers flying over controls. Her jaw tightened as the signal decrypted, a familiar frequency, laced with sharp, cold authority. Eliari Guard, my brother. Dax's expression darkened, teasing forgotten. He's close? Too close. Her pulse spiked. They're tracking energy signatures from your beacon. He straightened, biting back a groan as he stood. We move, now. They packed fast, gear, supplies, weapons, fading into the canyon shadows. Kaylin led them through narrow crevices and winding tunnels etched into the rock by ancient storms. Her markings glowed faintly in the dark, casting soft patterns along the stone. Dax kept pace, whispering, Your brother? He dangerous? She snorted, adjusting her rifle. You ever meet an older sibling who isn't? Dax grinned weakly, but his eyes stayed sharp, scanning the terrain. They emerged into the open desert, dunes stretching endless beneath the stars. In the distance, sleek Eliari patrol ships hovered low, their engines humming with restrained menace. Kaylin cursed under her breath, pulling Dax into the shadow of a derelict transport. Her ears twitched, catching fragments of comm chatter. Hybrid signature detected. Orders are clear. Eliminate the anomaly. Retrieve the human. Dax exhaled slowly, his hand brushing hers in silent understanding. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but surrender wasn't on the menu. Kaylin's gaze met his, fierce and defiant. We disable their comms, sneak past the patrol lines, fast and quiet. Subtle's my specialty, Dax whispered, checking his weapon. They moved as one, slipping through the ruins, dodging searchlights and sensor sweeps. Kaylin's knowledge of Eliari protocols turned the battlefield into a labyrinth of escape routes. Dax's quick reflexes and maddening humor kept the tension from boiling over. At one point, huddled beneath a collapsed wing, Dax whispered, So, hypothetically, your brother catches us. What happens? Kaylin's expression darkened. He hands you to the guard. He disowns me, possibly shoots me first for making him look bad. Dax winced. Family reunions sound rough. Only on odd-numbered cycles. Her deadpan delivery cracked his composure, a strangled laugh escaping him despite the danger. They reached the outskirts of the ruins, only to find their path blocked, a sleek patrol ship hovering, engines whining low. Eliari soldiers fanned out, weapons drawn, their polished armor gleaming under moonlight. Kaylin's brother stepped forward, tall and severe, his features sharp mirrors of her own. His eyes swept over them, landing on Kaylin with disappointment sharp enough to cut steel. You disgrace our blood, he hissed, leveling his rifle. Siding with off-world trash, abandoning your people. Kaylin's jaw clenched, shoulders squaring. My people abandoned me first. Dax stepped beside her, ignoring the rifle pointed at his chest. She saved me, risked everything for me. You see that as weakness? That's your problem. Her brother's eyes narrowed, fingers tightening on the trigger. Kaylin's grip on her weapon stayed steady, her voice ice cold. We're leaving. No, her brother snapped. You belong in the dirt, with the rest of the broken. Dax's fingers brushed hers, subtle but grounding. His gaze burned with quiet resolve. You're not broken, he whispered. Kaylin's chest tightened, but hesitation wasn't an option. Her plasma rifle hummed to life, bolts firing, explosions blooming in the night. They fought through the patrol, darting between wreckage, outmaneuvering soldiers with calculated defiance. Dax's shots were messy but effective, his jokes punctuating the firefight. Next time, he panted, ducking behind cover, we pick a planet without homicidal siblings. Kaylin snorted, blasting a drone out of the sky. Where's the fun in that? They carved a path to the outer dunes, the Eliari shouting behind them, ships launching into pursuit. But the desert was vast, the stars wide open, and together they ran. The human frigate descended through the atmosphere like a promise made of steel and fire, engines thrumming across the dunes. Kaylin stood on the canyon ridge, sand whipping around her boots, her long ears twitching against the wind as the vessel grew closer, casting shadows across the desert floor. Dax limped beside her, leaning heavier on his good leg but still wearing that maddening grin like it was standard issue. His ribs were still taped, his face smudged with dirt, but his eyes sparkled with the same stubborn defiance she'd gotten used to. You sure about this? He asked, watching the frigate settle, its landing struts digging into the sand like claws. Kaylin's gaze drifted toward the distant outline of the Eliari patrols, shrinking dots on the horizon. Her brother's forces wouldn't give chase beyond Leora, not with a human warship in orbit. But she wasn't sure safe and running were the same thing. Not entirely, she admitted, fingers brushing the plasma pistol holstered at her side. But you're annoying, loud, mildly reckless, and the only idiot who calls me beautiful without laughing after. Dax grinned wider, adjusting the strap of his salvage pack. Could have just said you'd miss me. I'll miss the quiet more. Her lips twitched, betraying the lie. They approached the frigate as the hatch hissed open, revealing crew members in mismatched uniforms, their curious eyes landing on Kaylin. She straightened instinctively, shoulders tight, every nerve braced for rejection. But Dax's hand settled lightly against her back, steadying her, no words needed. A wiry engineer whistled, eyeing Kaylin's markings, her long ears. That her? He asked, clearly impressed. The one who dragged your sorry hide through enemy territory? Dax smirked, shooting Kaylin a sidelong glance. Told you I wasn't hallucinating. The crew parted, no questions, no sneers, just the casual acceptance of a ship full of misfits, too busy surviving to care about bloodlines. Kaylin's pulse eased fractionally. Inside, the frigate hummed with life, scuffed consoles, flickering monitors, the faint scent of recycled air. Familiar, yet different from the Eliari vessels she'd grown up around. Here, tech wasn't pristine, but it worked. Like them. Dax led her to the bridge, leaning against a terminal as he activated the comm systems. Distress beacons off, he said, satisfaction creeping into his voice. No more patrols, no more Eliari tracking us. Kaylin crossed her arms, watching the desert shrink beyond the viewport. They'll still hunt me. They'll try, Dax corrected, eyes steady. But you're not alone anymore. For a moment, the words hovered between them, heavier than gunfire. She glanced at her reflection in the polished console, the pale markings, long ears, everything that made her an outcast. But Dax's gaze never wavered, not from her features, not from the quiet strength beneath. You asked why I think you're beautiful, he said softly, fingers drumming on the console. It's not the markings, it's not your eyes. Though those don't hurt, it's how you fight, how you stand, even when the whole damn system tries to shove you down. Kaylin's throat tightened unexpectedly. Careful, human soldier, you're getting sentimental. Dax grinned, unrepentant. Occupational hazard. The frigate lifted from Leora's surface, engines burning as the desert fell away. Kaylin exhaled, the weight of rejection, of years spent hiding, peeling back layer by layer. Later, she explored the ship. The engine bay cluttered with spare parts, the crew quarters small but worn with life. The others welcomed her with cautious smiles, curious glances but no contempt. It was unfamiliar territory, but better than fading into the sand. She found Dax in the mess hall, hunched over a data pad, smuggling protein bars like a criminal. His grin widened when he saw her. "Word of warning," he said, tossing her one. "Ship rations, slightly better than chewing on old wiring." Kalen bit into the bar, wincing. "You oversold it. See? I'm charming, but I have limits." They shared a rare, easy silence, the hum of the ship filling the space between them. Eventually, Kalen tilted her head, studying him. "Where do we go now?" "Wherever we want," Dax replied, popping a bite of his ration. "Galactic black markets, abandoned star stations, occasional thrilling escapes from bounty hunters." She smirked, the weight on her shoulders lighter than it had been in years. "And you're keeping score of how often I save your life, right?" "Absolutely. You're 3 saves ahead. I plan to catch up." The ship banked gently, stars sprawling across the viewport like scattered jewels. Kalen's long ears twitched as she watched the cosmos stretch before them. Vast, unknown, terrifying. But for the first time, she wasn't running. Not from her blood, not from her people, not from herself. Beside her, Dax nudged her shoulder, his grin bright enough to rival the stars. "Beautiful, strong, terrifyingly good with plasma rifles. You're going to terrify the galaxy." Kalen's smile was sharp, fierce, and unashamed. "Good." And together they plunged into the unknown. Outcast turned something more, proving that beauty wasn't perfection, but the fire that refused to be extinguished.